Have you ever shown up to a doctor's appointment only to talk to the receptionist and hear that they rescheduled your appointment? Or arrive at preschool and realize that it's picture day, but you had no idea because your spouse gets all the emails? Are you voicing your expectations? Or others even listening? You may feel like you've reached your boiling point at times, but what it all boils down to is communication. Hi, welcome to Path and Posture. I'm Miriah Turner here with my sister, Brittany Turner.
Hello.
And normally we have our other sister, Sierra Turner, with us, but we typically record these on evenings, and this is an afternoon.
It is.
This entire week has been
nap time.
It's been very displaced this entire week. So Sierra is still working, but shout out to Sierra Turner. Hey, how's it going? Hey, it's Friday.
We'll see you this weekend.
Yeah, you'll be off here soon. Anyway, with Path and Posture, it's a family podcast, as you can tell. And my sisters and I usually talk about the different paths that God has us on, and the postures or the attitudes that we feel called or led to have as we walk out whatever it is that God might have us walking through. And this week, Brittany...
Yeah, and that's just to add right there. You had mentioned not too long ago when we were discussing doing this during nap time that you like talking about things that happen in the week.
Yeah, so one of the more frustrating things for me when Brittany's like, hey, you ready to do a Path and Posture tonight? I'm like, no, because I don't know anything to talk about. There's no content on my mind.
Right.
And so Brittany's like, I can generate just a whole bunch of ideas for us to just pick one. I'm like, that doesn't make it authentic or genuine. Like, I want to experience something during the week and then talk about it.
And our listeners actually comment on how fluid our discussions are, especially those that know that we do this kind of off the cuff.
It really, okay. It's funny. If we could post pictures of what Path and Posture typically looks like, you would see my posture is hunched over a little microphone with Sierra. We're splitting a microphone.
Pillows and comfy blankets.
Pillows everywhere. Well, this is probably one of the more comfortable Path and Postures just because we're sitting on the couch in Brittany's library, just chatting with a blanket and our computers. And so there's no hunching over microphones in baby nurseries.
And silencing things.
Baby monitors because the kids are not sleeping. But things are nice right now, quiet, nap time. So yes, Path and Posture, it is very off the cuff. Every time we do it, it's something that we've experienced that week usually, or something that we've heard in the news recently. A lot of these have dealt with kind of COVID or just protests that have been going on and just different things that are dividing people around us. And we just kind of been talking it through to bring some sort of reconciliation and understanding, I guess you could say.
Communication.
It's communication is what it boils down to. And that's what we're talking about in this Path and Posture. So we've had some interesting instances of communication this week. Like I said, it's a very up in the air type week for our family. I have pretty much moved in with Brittany. So I'm not going to complain. Austin and I, we are very fortunate. We are getting our house painted right now.
Yes.
Because I am 7 months pregnant. There's no way.
And your house paint colors were stuck in the 80s or 90s.
They were dated.
90s.
They were a little dated, but they were warm and whatever. So I loved my home. But Austin's like, you know what? We have the opportunity. We're home and, there's not much going on. Not a lot of people coming over. No huge parties. So let's just get some housework done. And I'm like, all right. So we have moved out into 2 different places. I've been shuffling. Austin's parents, they have an apartment here in Dallas. And so that's been a huge blessing because we go there in the evenings to put the kids down and we all have a little bit of space. But during the day, I come to Brittany's house and we're doing all the meals, all the nap times, all the playtime, and it is mayhem.
Yes.
So, like I said, up in the air this week. And we
6 kids, 6 and under.
Yeah. And we're relying heavily on communication.
Yes.
Who is where, what is happening. And so there's communication happening between you and I, us and our spouses, and Austin and I and our painters.
Right.
And that hasn't been perfect. So this all started on Monday. And we had the painters come and they walked through and they went through our contract of what we had, asked to be done. And I had shown them what I wanted to be done. And they said, okay, great. We'll be here tomorrow with all the supplies and we'll be here at 8. I'm like, okay, great. So Tuesday comes and I have all the kids packed up. I'm ready to head to your place. It's 8 o'clock. And I'm like, okay, they'll be here any minute. And then it's 8:45. And I'm like, okay, where are they? And so I made some phone calls and they're like, okay, yeah, we need to give you more of a window frame next time. Sorry about that. I'm like, that's fine. I'm just getting ready to leave the house and I didn't want to lock up and you guys not be here. So anyways, they got there and so we left. And I am pregnant. I don't want to be around any of those fumes, which is why we've moved out, you know? So we're out for the week. You know, I've just been letting them work and then showing up in the evening to feed the fish, which I forgot about them for a day or two. And I had a dream.
Hey, they're new. They're new.
They're very brand new fish. And so I'm like, oh, I totally forgot about that. We have fish. And I was laying in bed at Austin's parents' apartment, just like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I had a dream that the fish was dead. And I'm like, oh, I haven't fed the fish. They've been home alone.
It's a pregnant dream.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, pregnancy dream. Or you can say pregnancy brain. I totally forgot about the fish.
Yes.
So I beelined it over to the house the next day and
not at 3 a.m.
No. When we woke up and we were coming over to your place, fed them. And we've been checking in on the painters every now and then. And everything's been great. It's looking very updated, very bright.
Yes.
Until
makes a difference.
Last night when Austin sent me some pictures. He was on his way home from work, stopped by the house before he came over here for dinner. We've been communicating with you. When's dinner? Austin's coming home. And they had painted the wrong room. And it was a room that Austin and I both really liked. It was a beautiful color.
She likes blue.
It was
a blue room.
And I never liked blue walls. Both, like I had been in 2 rentals, I guess, while Austin and I have been married. And I did not like the blue, but I had bought things to make it work. Blue rug in my dining room. And so when we moved in this house, I'm like, oh, here's blue again. Well, we're going to make it work. And I ended up liking it. And so I got used to it.
It was a deep blue. It wasn't like
not navy, but not like a hospital-y type thing either. But it was very muted, but nice. And so I just grew to like it. And so when Austin showed me the picture, I was like, oh, that's nice. What? I didn't realize what I was looking at first. But then
the absence of what you were looking at.
Yeah. So we're talking about communication. And, you know, it's just one of those things where it wasn't in our contract. I didn't get a phone call to verify. And so people just went ahead and did it anyway. And
so how do we process and deal with and move on with what happens when we paint the wrong room?
And we don't paint the wrong room. But when you do, because it's bound to happen, there's bound to be some miscommunication at some point. You know, initially I was like, well, I want it back. Let's go pick a color. But then I went over and looked at it and I'm like, you know what? It is really fresh feeling. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise because I guess maybe I was still hanging on to a lot of the dated aspects of my house because those colors, they're bold and people don't necessarily do that anymore. They'll decorate, they'll accent things with decor to bring color and vibrancy into a room, and they'll mute the background, they'll mute the walls, but then they'll bring things to life with, you know, artwork and
there's accent walls, not entire rooms being painted.
Who knew I was so trendy? I'm not really. So I'm like, okay, I guess we're just gonna go that route now. And I said, Austin, you know, just go ahead and tell them we'll keep the dining room. And honestly, they did all that work and it looks so fresh and clean. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need the blue back. It's okay. Yeah. So it turned out fine, but it's just one of the scenarios that we were laughing about this week when talking about communicating, because where everyone is needing to communicate because there's so many working pieces right now. And the painters dropped the ball.
You can laugh about that. I mean, and so we take
it's not like...
But last night you were lamenting.
Last night I was really upset.
And it's about finding that balance between laughing and lamenting.
And you know what? And honestly, they made a mistake, you know? And so they're like, they owned it. They said, oh, we're so sorry. We'll fix it. And they were great. And they've been a great company to work with.
They are a great company.
But I'm like, okay, well, I'll take a fresh room. That's fine. So... It's not like it was a monetary thing where I'm like having to bear a burden now. Right. So that's been good. But
even that, sometimes we do because they are bearing the burden.
Yeah, now they are.
So so in prospect of communication,
they're learning to communicate themselves within their company.
Learning,
So they learned at my Wall's expense. But that's okay. But yeah, so anyway, that's one thing that we've been communicating about this week. And then I mentioned that we've been shuffling around a lot. And so I've been moving from your place to Austin's parents' place and And the children have not had to choose. Like there's been shoes missing.
There hasn't been
There's
shoes
been clothes
since
missing.
March.
Yeah. I feel like with the whole COVID thing, our kids' shoes have been missing. It's just,
And sometimes they're closed.
yeah. Well, we don't go outside
Anywhere.
too often.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we just recently started going back to parks and everything. Well, anyway, so we were walking into this apartment. I'm like, okay, the kids need shoes. Mm-hmm. So I said to Austin, you carry Ricky, and then the girls. I know there's some shoes in the van. There's a pair of Crocs in the front, and then there's one tennis shoe in the back. And I have the other one in here. Can you go grab those? And he was like, yeah, sure.
Yay for photographic memory.
That I remembered that there was one tennis shoe in the back. Yeah. And so he left the apartment, went to go grab the shoes, came back, and he says, here's the Crocs. There was only one tennis shoe, so I just left it. I didn't see the other one. I said, yes, because I said I had the other one in here. He's like, well, I wish I had known that. I'm like, I said it. So
It's like Cinderella when the shoe breaks and he's like, oh no, it's the only shoe we had. And she's like, I had the other one right here.
Right here. He's like, oh. Except
This
he
was
was
not
happy.
yeah.
Austin was not happy. He's like, I'm going back to the car. So yeah.
Except he was happy.
Yeah, he was not happy. Not a Cinderella moment.
Not a
No. So, and communication in that instance, we've talked about grace a lot on this podcast. That's not a moment for me to be like, I told you, me. And it's not a moment for Austin to lose his head either.
Right.
It's just to understand that there was a misunderstanding and move on. Mm-hmm. I think we worked through that well because we had to get out of that apartment and get the kids here to let them run crazy. So what about you? Has there been any kind of miscommunication or communication things that happened to you this week?
I think with having Jack and Ricky here all the time and they're growing, boys are different in their relationships with one another, and they're also different in being young. I hear
They're the youngest in our
I
groups.
hear it changes with when you're raising boys. Jack and Ricky and Calvin are these three boys are the first, like the only boys really in our group. There's 5 girls now.
Yes.
And then there's Jack, Ricky, and Calvin. And so it's been interesting raising boys. So we're raising them and they're a little bit more emotional.
Yeah.
Which was surprising. But I hear it switches when they get older. The girls become more emotional and the boys become
interesting.
more chill.
But I could see that.
Moms of boys and girls have told me that.
Okay.
And so the boys are mama boys and just kind of a little bit more sensitive. And so Jack and Ricky being both that,
Yes.
there's been a lot of screaming and just inability to communicate what they need from the older girls, from their moms, from each other. And so lots of fights.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine with. I say, work it out now.
Figure it out now because you got these kids around you for the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life.
Yeah. So, communication there.
But it's creating an atmosphere, sometimes, especially when they're in the thick of it, of stress.
Oh, you just want to pull your hair out.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, why
They
are
don't
you
know
screaming?
how. So, whereas, adults, you and Brennan, Austin, and I, we know how to communicate, but sometimes we just don't do it well. They just don't know how. And so, like my Ricky, he's just now 2, and he will just yell.
Right.
And because he doesn't know how to say a word. And he also just yells because he's the youngest and he's desperate for attention. I'm like, sorry,
Well,
babe.
Calvin is, he's technically the youngest. Calvin.
Yeah, youngest of our group, but he's the oldest and the only in his group so far in his family.
But as far as like, I guess, a communication praise, you know, with COVID just being a part of 2020, there's talk of our businesses going back and whatnot. And I asked Brendan, and I was like, do you think you'll go back? And he's like, I don't know. To work, to the company.
Physically.
Physically to the building. And he said, I don't know. And I think when we had discussed that probably in this second month, I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? But I was like, oh, well, I'm used to you having here. And
Yeah, you guys have found a really great rhythm.
A really good
and
rhythm.
Brendan's found a great dungeon in the closet that he's been working in And honestly, your closet is a dungeon. It just keeps going and going.
It's not
and
a dungeon. It's a Narnia closet.
They like finished some attic space in this house.
It's Narnia.
Then you need to change your closet door to like some wardrobe doors.
I'm working on it. I need my porch first.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of home renovations and stuff. Another reason why Sierra is not here is because she's been having her floors done.
Yes.
She just moved into house.
Neighbors are doing it too.
Did she have her house on our last podcast?
I don't know.
I don't think she did. Or like
yes, she did.
Okay, she did.
Yes.
So yeah, but this is recent, within the month that they've just closed on a home. So
she has a home.
Like I said.
Oh yeah, she announced it last.
Lots of moving parts. So yeah, she's still
and our
getting
neighbors. They're a lot of them. It's funny because like we'll talk like, how are you doing? And do you have a person for this kind of remodel?
Yes.
Do you have a quote for this?
Yes.
And so we're sharing people, which is really cool. Neighbors are kind of updating, and that's another thing that's really cool to see is communities updating together.
Oh my gosh! There's no parking on my street. Across from me, there's nothing but bathroom tiles and everything on the sidewalk.
That crazy?
Yep,
it's
because
really nice.
they're remodeling their bathroom, and then down the street from me, on the same street, there's just ladders all in the yard, and I think they're getting their roof redone. So yeah, it's neat to see everybody jumping to update, and everybody's home, so they're like, why not? So if you think back, all listeners right now, if you think back to a moment in your life where you feel like the ball was absolutely dropped with communication,
it could be your fault or someone else's.
Yeah,
right?
Think about what was the reaction from any parties involved, and think about, was it God honoring? Was it more so just a initial emotional reaction? Did you regret it? What came of it? Think about all those things right now. And I also want to jump into some scripture in relation to communication as you're kind of pondering that life example for yourself. James 1:19 says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Such a simple verse, but a difficult verse to swallow, because it's the opposite of what we want to do.
And this is what I want to, as we are thinking back on, it could be just yesterday or today or this week or years ago, right? Something that's communication was misunderstood. Something happened where there was a blip in your life. What I love about that is that that blip is considered the path, because God, it's not surprised.
Yeah.
He's not surprised by that. But the posture of it is how we react and how we continue to react, how we accept the responsibility, and how we mend through it. And so the path was the miscommunication. Like there is, God was not surprised that happened.
Yeah.
I love the reality of that too. Because like we spend a lot of time regretting things happening.
Yeah.
But when we put it in the perspective that God holds that too, then we can kind of begin to take responsibility of what we can do next.
Yeah. I think one of the more frustrating things about miscommunication is when you are misunderstood.
Yes, that is very frustrating.
And no matter what you try to do to dig yourself out, if you don't take a moment to listen to why that person misunderstood you and hear their emotions and their thoughts toward you, and kind of swallow that, even though it's not pretty, and you could be totally like, I don't agree with that at all. That's not what I meant at all. If you don't take a moment to do that, they themselves aren't opening up their hearts and their minds to either accept your apology or accept your reasoning for how they misunderstood you. I think about when I used to work in television. A lot of the times with the morning show, I'm drinking coffee, drinking water, just trying to stay awake. I have to use the restroom. And so I would shut my mic off to use the restroom, because it's just weird. There's people running the mic board and you don't want to hear that.
Right.
But then I'd go back upstairs to read a story, and Miriah doesn't have her mic on. And so, you get in trouble for that. And I, knew that part of it was my fault because I turned it off.
Yeah.
But then as I'm walking upstairs and going into, the studio, there's also someone running a mic board, and they should be able to see, Miriah's, they're looking at a rundown. Miriah's got a read coming up here. Is her mic on?
Yeah.
And they can get in my little ear microphone and say, hey, turn your mic on.
Yeah.
And that was not happening either.
Yeah.
And so one of my producers was getting really frustrated with me, and her perception of me was that I was this irresponsible youngin' who didn't take responsibility for her own microphone, me.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's not it at all. I need a reminder. And I think that I should be allowed to turn my mic off when I go to the bathroom. And when I go upstairs, it's also someone else's job to check on that. You know, there's two people involved with this microphone, not just me. There's someone running a mic board. So anyway, we had to have a sit down conversation, and I had to listen to a lot of stuff that she just didn't like about me. Some people just don't like you.
Yeah.
And you just got to stomach that. And it was hard to stomach. Kind of took me a few days to process, like, I can't believe I work with someone who really just doesn't like me. But
you'll find that, oh my gosh, you'll find that so much in corporate.
Yeah.
Like you can't choose a lot of paths. You cannot choose that path.
Yeah. And people just sometimes don't think you deserve a job or you shouldn't be here. And honestly, it's like, you didn't hire me. So it wasn't your call.
Right.
Someone else thinks I'm worthy, and they're the ones I answer to. So that's all right. But anyway, so it took a lot of listening and understanding and sitting down. And I let her do a lot of the talking because she had a lot to get off her chest.
And you are, let me just say, as your sister, you are a very good listener.
I try. It's not perfect.
I always tell Brendan.
My husband's helped me a lot with that because I think he listens well too.
He does.
But it might be one of those middle child things. Some people say they're a natural born mediator. Some people say they're natural born instigators too.
That would be me.
So yeah. But middle children, I can see being instigators too. Some of the sarcasm stuff that I say to you and Sierra, it's not passive. Yeah. So back to the story. So anyway, she vented and I listened, and I was just, okay, I'll work on it. I don't agree with some of the things you say. There's but I will work on it and make note. So in that moment, the most frustrating thing is that I don't agree with anything coming out of your mouth.
How dare you judge me?
How dare you judge me? But, it's not for me to respond to.
Right.
That's not what we're called to do. We don't respond in anger. Everyone should be, touching back to James, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. That's what we're called to do. And it took a lot of wisdom in that moment for me to act that way. That's not a natural reaction. That's a Christ-like reaction.
Yes.
That James is telling us to be like Christ in those moments. But think about your natural response when somebody's like, "You are so irresponsible." You're like, "Excuse me? Do you even that do you know what everyone at that moment wants to rip someone a new one."
Right.
That's the natural response. You just don't. You just can't. That's not what Christ is. And honestly, there's a reason why we don't do that. Not just because, oh, that's a no. Jesus says no. It's because what comes of that? Nothing. Nothing good comes from arguing.
So what
and
good?
A spirit
that would be my next question.
Anger.
What good comes from doing the listening? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about.
Well, in that example for me,
Yeah.
was a more fruitful atmosphere and a productive work environment. Like, okay, I now know that this is bothering this person, so I'm knowledgeable of that. Let me work to make that amend and work to make that better. But at the same time, there's peace. There's no more strife. She got everything off her chest.
Yes.
And I'm like, all right, I understand. I'll work to make it better. And so that's what she needed to hear. And then we just move forward. And it's not like, oh, we had this big blowout in the back room. No, that's not productive because then you still have those angry vibes with your coworkers. And that is not.
It's very unhealthy. Yeah.
Yes, it's so bad because you go to work every day like,
right. And
So-
I mean, in that it goes the same for family. Like when between a husband and a wife, like one of the things that I'm so grateful for is in our book, Echo, Reaching for Authenticity, I write about a family covenant that Brennan brought to me in 2018. And because we had taken our marriage vows, and marriage vows are great, but they don't include necessarily all the time a family, and knowing the depth of that, what you're about to kind of take on together. And so he kind of just came up with this covenant, and we review it once a month and to see if we're following. It has a bunch of questions that's in the book. But one of the fruits that came from that is that when we argue now, it's like done in 3 minutes. Like because we know what we expect and we know kind of what we want to see from one another and place into one another regarding our gifts and stuff like that. And so it's just so nice to see when you know somebody and the expectations. And I think work atmospheres would probably be better if they're very clear on these expectations. You know, same thing with when I used to coach volleyball.
Yeah.
It's like these are the things that you see on our team. This is what I expect if you want to see the court, right? And there was a certain, because these kids are able to speak with the coach and talk to the coach and see that she truly does love you. That these are the things that I think they were able to reason with a little bit more in regard to their character and their actions. Now, in corporate America, it's very hard because not everybody sees the CEO or the people calling shots. It's like this person reports this person, and everybody kind of has a different idea and also a different agenda. And so communication can be like telephone.
Yeah, and the more people you go through, the worse it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another verse I want to touch on is Ephesians 4:29. It says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." And I think that's important. Any role, any path that we're walking, just to be the edifier in your group, in your party, in your family, in your friends, to be the person that's communicating words of love, affirmation,
And peace.
and peace. And that's so, so needed in this time that our nation, our states, our cities, and in terms of, do we go back to school? Do we wear masks at all businesses or just a few? So just like so much division.
And
so,
then socially, like we're dealing with a lot of social topics too. And this is something that, you know, people are asking for us to listen. They're asking for their families to listen, their businesses to listen. And it's one thing I also wanted to add, that you can listen and still have an opinion.
Oh, yes. Okay. Because I was just about to go into this. Ephesians talks about don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, only what's helpful for building up others. But then I wanted to talk about Proverbs 18:2 that says, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but delight in airing their own opinions." And it is just an opinionated atmosphere everywhere you go. Honestly, I've stayed off so much social media. I only post the path and posture and maybe like happy birthday, my kids, because there's just nothing but opinions.
Oh, but congratulations. You did just celebrate an anniversary.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 8 years. Been married 8 years. So yeah, that's another little post. All I do are birthdays and anniversaries and maybe some holidays.
That's okay. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to have a social media presence right now, especially if people don't want to listen.
a lot of people, I mean, that mute button's been like burned out. But again, you need to listen to some of it.
Exactly.
To know what everybody's thinking. But at the same time, there's a point where, you know, I feel like we're called to listen. We're not called to be bombarded. And God knows that. God sees that. You know, you educate yourself
And grow.
and you have compassion and empathy and you listen to other people.
Grow in silence.
But you're not required to change your mind per se.
Right.
You can love and understand and disagree.
Right.
And still be Christ-like. You can love, understand, disagree, and still be cordial. It doesn't have to be this polarization that somehow our culture's adapted to.
Especially if your opinion and your ideals are pointing and, you know, into the will of God. And I mean, because we don't do that perfectly. So there's absolutely things that can change. But if you are striving to live in right standing with God, and you can't change, you can't compromise that.
Yeah. One thing that burns me, as a prior journalist, you know, working in television, the era of unbiased journalism is dead, deceased. I read articles now, and no, you have to dig to try to find unbiased news, because I read these articles and I'm reading a few sentences. Okay, fact, and then they throw in their opinion. I'm like, I get reamed for that if I wrote that way.
Well, I mean, emotional responses are flashier, and you know they're stronger.
People throw in their opinion on how a certain person said something or did something, and it creates a rise in the listener or the reader, and you try to alter their state of mind and how they're taking your story. You want them to think along the way that you're thinking too, instead of being unbiased and just reporting.
Yeah.
Period. That's what journalism is. and it crushes me that it's gone. So
It's okay. We have you here.
yeah. Now people are like, what's going on? I'm like, I have no idea. I left television. I haven't checked the forecast. I haven't checked the news. I mean, I really just kind of check out. I live under a rock and I listen to nursery rhymes.
She does not live under a
with
rock.
my children.
No.
No. Well, I am very unplugged, and I don't know if it's because I feel like I want to shelter my kids from what's going on.
No, there's not well, it's not so much of a shelter as it is a measure. You want to measure your kids. You never want to shelter them from what's going on because they're going to pop open that lid one day. And
I know. No, I don't want my kids under a rock.
But
I don't want to create that either. But I
Well,
have that tendency maybe. So I need to be careful.
but you do measure.
Yeah.
And so a good
Well, like that was so hard when the whole Corona thing happened. Explaining it to our kids, like, what is it?
right, they can't see it. It was
We called it the sickness. We can't go
sickness.
play outside at the park because of the sickness. We can't go into the store because of the sickness. And you just have it, and you don't inflict fear or anything like that.
Right.
You don't make them afraid of it. You just say it's there, and we're just being careful.
right. Jesus is taking care of it.
Yeah. So everything else that I can't explain to my kids, I don't turn the TV on and let them watch all these protests in the background and things. Because what is that? It's like division. I don't know how to explain that to my 4, 3, and 2-year-olds. There's just, my only one who really would be asking is my 4-year-old. She's the inquisitive one.
She's very inquisitive.
There's just so many images.
And there's I mean, especially right now with it being so fresh and unedited, right? So when you watch something live, it's very hard to navigate that. But you can go back and you can teach your kids history.
Yeah. Yes, and which we will. Absolutely.
Which we do.
Yes.
And, especially, when I talk to Remington, my daughter, she loves the story of the woman at the well. Mm-hmm. And so she loves that story. And so it started very, very loosely. We were talking about it. Mm-hmm. And then eventually my whole desire with her is to go into what exactly she did. Mm-hmm. And, and she can't handle that right now. She doesn't understand.
Yeah. She didn't know why she was an outcast.
Yeah. But she just knows that it was hot. Mm-hmm. They're at the well and they're thirsty and there's something happens there. And I thank God that story is one of her favorites because it is so personal. And it's something that we can grow in.
Renee's favorite is David and Goliath. I don't know why.
That's really cute.
She likes I think she just likes the illustrations of Goliath in the Bible. Like, oh my gosh, he's so big and scary. But David gets him.
Yeah.
Because God is there and he trusts God.
And that's what I love about also so you have David and Goliath.
But these are such graphic stories.
They are. But so if you want to take it into more of a child story, that's where you go with Tolkien, where a hobbit takes down, Sauron. And
yeah, it's just, So, I mean, back to just communicating now we're talking about communicating with our kids,
right?
How to explain to them what's going on in our day.
I know.
It's all historic.
It's hard.
It's all making history.
And if you're listening to this, we get it. It's hard. Mm-hmm. And we don't know the perfect way.
Mm-hmm. Everybody knows their own kids best,
except for what we're saying here is listen and when that wrong room gets painted, take a moment,
see the blessing in disguise, maybe
see the blessing in disguise, or just turn to the person that you would best communicate how you feel. You have to process whether it's externally or internally correctly with people who you trust that are in your circle. Do not go off there's a lot of little pieces here to managing communication.
Yeah. Touching back to Proverbs 18:2, with fools delighting in airing their own opinions. It's from every side. It's not one-sided right now. It's every side, left, right, Christ, atheist, whatever. Anybody who's got an opinion just is putting theirs on full blast.
Oh yeah.
And this is such a time where we just need to listen to everything around us and not be bullhorning our own ideas.
Right.
In my opinion. There you go. That's
my opinion.
So
even as Christians, St. Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words.
I love that one. I love that quote from him.
I do too. I think it's such a great example of being, and we've mentioned this a couple times, the hands and feet of Jesus, and figuring out what that is, and then using words.
Yeah. When to use them.
When to use them.
Because that's everyone's default is to just talk, like I
opinion.
said, bullhorn opinion, and what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's evil. This is Jesus. This is the way. And instead of really understanding people where they're at, and getting to know them as people, getting to know them as whoever they are, and just being that form of Jesus in their life, and letting them realize what's different about you, not just you telling them.
I know,
You know?
and it's hard.
It is. No, but that is, I feel like, the way we're called to minister. Jesus, yes, he had sermons on the mount and everything, but he had relationships with, the disciples, and he had friends, and like the woman at the well, he talked to her.
Yeah.
And didn't, condemn her. But like I always say, Jesus loves you so much. He loves you just the way you are, but too much to leave you that way. And I feel like, and like St. Francis of Assisi, and then the way that Christ enters our life and changes us, and we're called to change because of that love. Those are just two things that we can't forget about. That we're supposed to use words when necessary, but most of it's in our actions.
Yeah, and being present,
and
and being there.
And Jesus will change us in time, and that happens with our actions. And
it's really hard to act and to be present too when you're not with one another. And so I think that's a lot of the reason why there's a lot of opinions being thrown out into the sky right now, is because
people can't get into their groups and talk about it.
Yes, they're not gathering.
That's true.
So you need that space.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful that we have this space with Path and Posture to just kind of talk about it, vocalize it, that you guys are listening. Thank you, listeners. And again, I hope that you were able to think about a time that there was some miscommunication, or you were misunderstood, and what the reaction was, and think about just some of the scriptures that we touched on today, and how that could change your reaction to a similar situation in the future.
And if there was a room that was painted the wrong color, take a step back and try to process it as a blessing in disguise and go forward.
Yeah, they changed my way of thinking.
You are free to go forward.
Yep. So, all right. Well, I'm going to close this in prayer. Father, we thank you so much for this time. We thank you for the words of affirmation. We thank you for Path and Posture, and just the opportunity to talk about you, talk about what's going on in our world, and talk about how you are ever present, and how you'll never abandon us, and you're walking through it with us. We appreciate our listeners. We thank you so much for them taking the time to just edify their minds with your word, and just with these conversations, that they join in the conversation with us. So we appreciate that. And Father, we just want to bless your name and give you all praise and glory. And we pray this in the name of Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
And this song is actually called Words.
I have a few words to say, if you don't mind, you see. I've learned above all else, love is patient, love is kind, but that's more than I can say for you. It's more than I can find there in your fruit. We all know what matches do. Hatred's blaze has found the vine. Set this garden on fire with your words, your whispers desire to bring hurt. You stand there and watch it all burn down. It all burns down, yeah. When you don't get your way, the price is paid with lies, and jealous embers may remain, but love